to point out that this is a session about mentoring and best practice in mentoring. We want to talk to people about why they should get into mentoring as either a mentee or a mentor, and we want you to know how you can get the most out of a mentoring partnership. Now, one thing that we should cover first is what mentoring is. And that is a professional and personal development partnership in which someone shares their experience and knowledge with someone who wants to grow and progress. It's a two-way confidential partnership of learning, development, challenge, and feedback. So that's a definition that's come from our friends at Screen Skills. On our panel, we've got Ash and Alex, who are both exceptional mentors who've worked with us on Wildscreen mentorship programs in the past. And we also have Evelyn, who's been mentored as part of the Girls Who Click ambassadorship program. So these are phenomenal examples of mentoring kind of in real time. But remember that each mentor and each mentoring relationship is different and unique. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're navigating your own mentoring journeys. So I'd like to start with some introductions for our panelists. And I've got a question for each of the three of you as well. Could you tell me what each of you currently do and what you think makes a great mentoring partnership? Ash, can I start with you?
Sure. So I'm presently a director with the BBC Natural History Unit. I'm working on a series called Home, which is a really it's a big high-end natural history series for National Geographic. And I'm working as a director on that. I've originally come from an international background. So I've only just moved to the UK a year and a half ago, and it's been great fun. So that's what I've been up to. And what do I think makes a really good mentoring partnership? I think it's quite a logical answer there. I think that the most important thing, like any other relationship, in your professional world, is the rapport you have with your mentor, the mentor-mentee rapport that you have. If there's a personality click, if the two of them just get along as people really well, that's half the battle won there. So that match, I think that organic match between two people, in terms of really wanting to connect and really wanting to have that sort of take that forward, that match, I think, is make or break, because sometimes there might be a fantastic mentor, but they might be better matched with a different mentee. And there might be, a mentee that wants to bring a certain something onto the table, but might be better matched with a different mentor. So that rapport is really important between the two people. And the other thing I think that's really, really is important in that relationship is open communication. It's really important to be comfortable with that open communication, because that, again, is the very foundation of how mentorships work very well.
Alex, you're second, I'm afraid. Would you be able to introduce yourself and tell us what you think makes a great mentoring partnership?
Yeah, hi. I'm a producer director. I'm at Plimsoll Productions in Bristol. I've been here coming up for 6 years. Doing various series for Netflix, Night on Earth and Animal for Netflix, recently Incredible Animal Journeys for National Geographic, Disney, and now I'm doing a series for the BBC, actually, on British wildlife. And yeah, I've had a few mentees over the course of the last few years. I think the best partnerships have definitely been, and this sort of builds on what Ash has said, really, where you're able to play off each other's strengths. And so some of the earlier mentees I had were through kind of nationwide schemes that weren't necessarily natural history based, and I just didn't feel like I had, I think I was able to be some help and be in a sort of general way, but I don't know specifically, for instance, the industry in London or outside of the natural history world. Whereas when I've had mentees that are, have similar interests and ambitions, it's easier and more rewarding to be that mentor, but also I think it must be more helpful for the mentee to have a mentor who is in a role that you would ultimately like to reach yourself, I suppose. And so that also applies to the sort of sides of the business. So within natural history, it makes most sense for me to work with people who are on sort of editorial talent side, whereas for a craft role or a production management role, there would be other people who would be more suitable fit for those. Yeah, and I mean, having said that, sometimes people, when they're starting out, don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do, what route they want to take. And in that case, it can still be useful to have a mentor that can give general advice and then maybe sort of shift you towards, once you start to get an idea of what it is you want to do, shift you towards someone more specialist, perhaps, that can help more specifically.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Alex. Evelyn, how about yourself? Could you give me a quick intro and in your experience, what makes a great mentoring partnership?
Yeah, of course. So hi everyone, my name's Evelyn, and I'm a recent UE wildlife filmmaking graduate, and now I'm a runner at BBC Studios. And my mentoring journey, mentoring, I'm a mentee. It started through Girls Who Click, maybe 4 years ago now. So I was still doing my undergrad zoology degree, and I knew I wanted to go into wildlife filmmaking. So I saw this Girls Who Click ambassadorship came up, and I applied, and I got it. Surprisingly, I didn't think I would. And I got paired with Erin Rainey, who is just a superstar, as many of you will know. And what was really helpful for us, like Ash said, just the connection we had was immediate. We're still friends, like speak all the time. And what was really helpful was I had a project, so I was creating my first film, and she could be there throughout the whole of it to support me and give me feedback. I was going into this film blind. I had no training, I had no nothing. So she was just like this fountain of knowledge for me. And over time, it just developed and developed. And she stayed with me through applying to the degree. And our relationship was just featured on Queens in the last episode. Just the power of like sharing knowledge with the younger generations. But I think one of the things that she really appreciated was me having respect for her schedule. She's based between the Falklands and Washington, DC and Alaska. So I had to be I was always very conscious of, she might not have time, and that's fine. But even if it's just a quick text to her there, it doesn't have to be, an hour-long Zoom every time. And I think that really worked for us actually throughout our mentorship. Kind of, it wasn't really that regimented or scheduled. It was just, if we just wanted to chat, she was always there for me. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Ash, it really, just being a kind person and being driven. And I wanted to absorb as much information from her as possible. And, she kind of is one of the most amazing people at sharing knowledge, as a lot of women in this industry know. So it was just a perfect mix. I was just at the start of my career. She was very willing to help. But yeah, she's been great, and mentoring, it's meant a lot to me.
That's great, Evelyn. I wanted to kind of follow up on that slightly. So if anyone doesn't know who Erin Rainey is, get off this webinar right now and get on the internet, because Erin's a fantastic wildlife cinematographer. And I think what I find really fantastic about your story, Evelyn, is the fact, and correct me if I've got this wrong, that your kind of camera experience, for example, and technical experience when you were getting started a few years ago was quite minimal.
Yeah.
And when as a newcomer to the industry with that very shallow depth of knowledge, what drove you to search for a mentor in particular?
Well, yeah, like I said, for years I only had my mum's old camera, and I would just be in my garden, and I didn't even know what shutter speed was. I'd never actually clicked record. I'd only been a photographer. So I just wanted to learn as much as possible from her. I wanted to learn how to build sequences. I wanted to know what it was like to, be a woman in the field. So she gave me all this technical expertise as well, but just, how to do your taxes as a freelancer. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Jacob.
I think it does, because I think it shows that the idea of a mentor is to fill in these gaps that you don't know are there. A lot of the time, if someone says, I want to get into this industry, but you often don't necessarily know what the industry is, and to be able to be given that first-hand insight into the lay of the land almost.
I had no idea, Jacob, honestly. I had no clue about this industry. So everything I learned was from her. And then actually going into the masters, I felt like I had this really good sense of what was actually going on. And we'd just done the Queen's shoot a month before I started this master's. And, you know, even just knowing what a carne was, I was like, I don't know what that is. But yeah, I think it was good that I had like a very minimal base of knowledge. But then, you know, as you, like we said on the phone, Jacob, as you progress in your career, you can always develop. You always can learn something new. So I think being mentored at any stage of your career could be invaluable. You get different perspectives from someone that doesn't do exactly the same thing as you. But yeah.
Ash, I'd like to know about the significance of mentors in your professional development, because I understand that early on in your production career, you kind of nailed having mentors and getting insights from people. I'd like to know a bit more about your attitude early on towards building the skill set that you now have.
Gosh, so I mean, the significance of mentors in my career and development, I don't think words can sort of do justice to what that's meant to me, because I have come from an international background. So I've been based in, I did my master's in New Zealand, but I've always lived in India mostly. And, you know, being anywhere other than on one street in Bristol, you're not in the heart of the industry. You're somewhere else. You're in a different country. So actually, to be able to belong to the industry from across the world, especially if you're not doing primary camera, if you're doing like directing, producing, is something that's very, very challenging. So to be able to have mentors within the industry, people that you can turn to for everything from like sort of guide to navigate your career challenges, sounding board for ideas, for encouragement, for even just reality checks, was really, really invaluable to me. Now, when I started out like this, I started out like maybe now nearly 10 years, 9-10 years now. Mentorship programs that are now much more common, like through schemes and like, even through Wildscreen and stuff. Mentorship schemes have become a lot more common, but that didn't exist so much even quite, a few years ago. It didn't exist. There were no schemes like that you could apply to for a mentor. So for me, very much I had to create those relationships quite organically. And of course, Wildscreen played a huge part in that, because every time I came to Wildscreen, I met people and created those relationships quite organically, met people and sort of, started that rapport and managed to find people within the industry that made all the difference. It made all the difference for me to understand this industry, to even understand what is expected of me. Expected of me to be able to take the next steps in my career. So I think in terms of what this has meant to me on a professional level, it's just absolutely invaluable, really. It's really made my career, frankly, the people that have been there from the start. And they know who they are. So, and the other part of it was in terms of my attitude that I brought to it. If I may say so myself, there was a lot of enthusiasm and passion and drive and unapologetic amounts of energy, because I love this. I mean, there was no hiding it. This is all I've ever wanted to do. This career, I love it. Like, I really feel like I was born to do this. Like, so when I came into these sort of mentorship relationships that sort of became mentorship relationships quite organically, to be honest, I think I brought so much drive and passion to it. And the fact that I was just so eager to learn and really grasp every tiniest opportunity to learn, to sort of take people's advice on board, to really go out of my way to like say, okay, this is the advice that you've given, I'm going to go and get this done, or that's really cool, let me try and figure out how to learn that. So leveling up skills, all of those things. So when you bring that energy and you sort of bring that drive to it, it's quite evident that you really, really want to be in this career. So you're not it's very difficult to succeed in a mentor-mentorship relationship if you're tepid about it. So I think the very best ones, like, exactly what Evelyn was also saying, both Erin and she are just bursting with energy. You can just tell both of them are completely passionate about this. So that plays a part in the success of both, actually, in the sort of success of the relationship mentor-mentee wise.
I think that's such an important point, Ash. Alex, have you found that the more motivated your mentees are, the more motivated you are?
Yeah, I remember the days when I was enthusiastic, but yeah, no, it does. It definitely helps. It kind of it's something that I found particularly rewarding because yeah, it does give me a chance to sort of see things from, like, remember what it was like starting out, and and it was hard, obviously, and it's hard starting out, but also it's exciting, and you are doing new stuff and you're learning new things and so on. And so yeah, being on the other side of that and being able to yeah, try and impart some of my experience and from over the years, then that in turn kind of is a re-energizing thing and makes me think, oh yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly lucky to be in the position that I'm in, and I shouldn't ever take it for granted. And yeah, that's really been a part of that, and yeah, feeling that sort of energy from people that I'm mentoring.
That's wonderful. And I kind of want to dig into that experience that you've got a little bit, because you've had several mentees now, and I'd be interested to know what the balance is between what topics people are coming to you about. So are they talking to you about general industry advice? Is it technical skills? Are they after feedback on their own work? What do you find that people are bringing to you?
Yeah, a mix of all of that thing, I think. A good sort of variety of stuff, and that's where it can be really interesting and exciting, I think, because and also makes me think more about stuff if people are asking for a sort of a wide variety of advice. And I think it's like industry advice, sort of general industry advice and introductions to people and stuff are really useful for people starting out, but there's only so far that can go before actually they just need to kind of get immersed in the industry properly and learn things firsthand. Whereas if they've also sort of on top of that have got, say, a personal project of some description or a show reel or something like that I can give feedback and advice on, then that kind of, like, going back to what I was saying earlier, that kind of feeds into my strengths, because that's literally my day job is taking that stuff from people and suggesting ways to do it better, or like how do it differently or whatever. And so yeah, I've had that a few times where I've been able to make suggestions on an edit, or what additional footage someone might need to shoot for their thing, or ways to tell a story, or tweaking a script, or whatever it might be. And that feels like a good kind of concrete way of mentoring that will complement the more general sort of advice and support. And yeah, so I would advise sort of wannabe mentees, as it were, to have something like that they can work on and improve, and sort of yeah, something concrete like that. And that's a good thing anyway to be doing to get into this industry, to have something like that to show people that you're whether that's just a short film about bees in your garden or whatever it might be. And yeah, and then you can also make the most of having access to the knowledge and experience of someone who's experienced in the industry to pass on to you for that project of your own.
I think that's something that we've talked about.
Can I add to that, Alex?
Yeah, please.
And Jacob, I think, yeah, that's really important. So if I was approaching someone again, not that I will, but having a project that you're working on, like starting off specific with your advice, then through that building up the relationship, and then maybe that can lead to the broader advice. But I think if you came in strong, you didn't know the person, you messaged them out the blue and was like, help me with everything, that's like that's probably quite overwhelming. And people, I think the mentors need some direction. Erin really found it really helpful that I had my first film to work on, and since then we've our basis of our conversations have been the projects, but around that it's the general advice. So yeah, my advice, if you're approaching someone, would have something specific that you really want to learn at first, and then broaden it out. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. I think that's fantastic advice, and I think it's something that Alex and I've spoken about before. is that this idea of almost simulating a workplace environment for the mentor. Obviously, this is kind of it's a voluntary act, isn't it? This is support. And so if you can create a situation where it's as easy for someone as possible, giving them a scaffolding, a framework that they can work off of, be it goals or something to feed back to, or getting them to basically replicate on a lower level their day job, so they go, no, I know exactly what I'm doing. These aren't people that are professional mentors. These aren't life coaches. These are people who are very good at the job that they do, and we should be utilizing them at what they're good at, as opposed to making them think, how do I mentor someone? It's how can I be a great PD? How can I be a great production manager? So I think it's a really important point to dig into. And I think we're hovering around this topic of kind of getting started in those mentoring relationships. That's something I wanted to speak to you about, Evelyn. When you first found out that Erin would be mentoring you, how did you go about, I mean, literally starting that relationship? And then how did you introduce that framework? Did you set goals for yourself? And how did you establish those goals between the two of you?
It was actually very casual. Like everything was very casual. She introduced herself to me. We had a call, kind of discussed where I was at with my life and where I wanted to go. And then, at first we just broke it down into, send me some of your photos and we'll go over them. But we never set a schedule or anything like that. And I was always understanding of her time. She was understanding of my time. So we established this relationship where it was like, when you need me, I'm here. But you can go off and I can go off and do my own things, and then I'll come back to her when I've worked on something. She was just very supportive, and I found her being very encouraging, really helpful for me. She was always, I'm someone who needs like affirmation, but having her like making me feel like I can do it, and being very positive was really helpful. But I had to be also receptive to her feedback. I don't think it'll work if you already think you're the best, because you got to be able to take their advice and make the subtle changes, because that's how you grow. Being receptive to her feedback was kind of crucial.
For sure. That's something that it was in the definition at the start as well, which I really like. It's this idea of challenge. Not only is a mentor there to give feedback and share their knowledge, but to also kind of hold you to account on the goals that you've set. You kind of use them as a sounding board, if that's right.
I was more likely to go out with my camera because I knew she was kind of waiting on the other side. That was a big encouragement.
That's fantastic. Ash, that idea of challenge, is that something that you find useful, and is that something that you find yourself doing to people that you're mentoring as well?
Definitely. You've got to be able to sort of push people to bring the very best out of them, I think, for sure. So yeah, totally agree with what you were saying.
Yeah, and then again, like in the industry itself, that's how we're working. My researchers and so on are coming to me with things, and I'm giving them feedback and saying, no, actually that's a great idea, but for this reason it's not going to work because I've tried this before and we need to do it a different way. Can you come back and think about whatever it might be? And that is the nature of the industry. You're always working to feedback from people that you then need to improve yourself on, and that's challenging you to try and do stuff better and keep making improvements.
It's a great trial and error industry, isn't it? There has to be a bit of balloon popping so that people remember that you popped their balloons. I think that's really important. Now, Ash, there'll be people in the audience and lots of people watching this back who will probably be a bit worried about the fact that we know the industry is going through what we'd call a transitional period, and there's not a lot of roles available, especially to people who are early in their careers. What do you think that emerging talent people can do in terms of what they can bring to mentors, but also in terms of kind of engaging with potential mentors to make the most of these employment gaps that they might be experiencing?
Yeah, it is a very, very difficult time in the industry right now. And there's no doubt that we're going through a very tough time right now. All the more hard for emerging talent as well. This is like probably one of the hardest times to sort of break in. But again, I'm going to draw from what I know, from my own experience. Again, being based abroad, we've always had, at least in my careers, I've always had gaps. I've had a project from January to February, April, whatever. And then there's been like a few months. And then after that, again, maybe, at some point, again, something. So there's always been gaps, especially if you've not been based in Bristol, there's always been gaps. But personally, I've never looked at those gaps as, I mean, of course, it's scary because every time, even now, every time, you have a job, you think, oh my God, this is going to be my last ever. So it's going to be, you always think that there's not going to be another one coming. But it's very scary at that point of time. But those gaps actually, especially as an emerging talent, can be very valuable because you can go away and do things that you are really passionate about. That gives you as a filmmaker a sort of identity, a very unique identity in terms of who you are. So whenever I had sort of these gaps between things, first of all, I always sort of went away and did something that had something to do with impact or conservation, or a story that I felt very passionately about locally, so wherever I was. When I was not doing that sort of thing, even if I was doing something entirely different, building a completely different skill set, it's bizarre how that has fed into my main career. So I remember one stint that I did on a Hollywood film that was being shot in India, and I was working on that. And it's amazing what that experience in drama, how that fed into my experience back in natural history when I worked with people, and I worked, later across shows that have had a people element to it, etc. Also, it gives you a completely different standard of how things are done. So every single experience that you have, you'll be surprised how much it feeds into your primary career. Even if you go away and do a, advert, so go away and do work on a food show or a travel show, it doesn't matter entirely what that thing is, but you'll be surprised how these diverse experiences that you take up in those gap periods can totally feed back into your primary career in natural history itself. And sometimes that doesn't have to be film related. That can be something as straightforward as working in the conservation space. Even that is something that's going to feed straight back into your main career. So I personally think it's very important to approach those gaps in your career with a lot of positivity, to use it as an opportunity, especially if you're starting out as an emerging talent. Use it as a real opportunity to diversify that CV of yours, enhance skills, and really look out for opportunities out of the box, out of what you expect the next thing to be. That can also really help sort of expand your network as well. So I think that would definitely be one of my primary bits of advice.
There you go, everyone. There's your motivational speech to get out there. I think it's such a good point, really. I would assume, and I've experienced this myself, that people often go out and do these experiences. They have them as a line on their CV, or they don't even make it onto the CV. And then when, say, someone in a mentoring situation finds out that you've got that experience, it's then that you get that reaffirmation of, no, that's actually fantastic experience.
Exactly.
You just need to frame it in a way which showcases what you've learned from that, because you think it's non-relevant. It's actually really relevant in an inverted way to what you might expect it to be. So that's brilliant. And I think my question, which is for Alex, I'll start with yourself. I might bounce to Ash. Do you think that mentoring is a good balm for imposter syndrome if someone's experiencing that early in their industry experience?
I'm sure it is. I think, to be honest, I think both ways round. So for the mentor and the mentee, it's a good way. So a mentee is going to, hopefully, with a good mentoring relationship, going to realize, that mentor is going to help them realize, oh no, you've got a load of skills, whatever they, soft skills, hard skills, whatever it might be, that are really relevant, that you may, like you're just saying, that may not be something you thought was that relevant, but it is. And this experience, the number of CVs I've gone through of people with people to sort of try and help them improve, and I've just been like, why on earth are you not making more of this particular thing? You did a year on working with elephants or whatever it was, and it's like, why? That's a great thing. If I saw that on a CV of a researcher, I'd be like instantly like, oh, this person's spent time in the field. They've done, they've worked with different people in a different country. It's just like, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, I think for the mentee, that can be really helpful. And I think as a mentor, sometimes I realize I know more than I thought I did by giving advice to someone. Like recently I was asked to give some advice on camera trapping for someone who was doing a shoot at night, and because I've done stuff on Night on Earth, I thought, well, okay, I'll try. I'm not really super technical. I don't, how much can I be? But once I started thinking about it and chatting to them about it, I surprised myself by coming up with useful ideas that I think were appreciated. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, I remember I do actually know stuff. So yeah, or I realized that, I actually have quite a decent network of people that I can draw on and pass on contacts for, even though I've always considered myself quite crap at networking. It's like, yeah, so I think it does work both ways.
Great answer, thanks, Alex. Evelyn, you had a big smile on your face when that question was first asked. Can you relate to that idea of imposter syndrome being tackled by mentoring from the other side of that partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, like I said, I've never had anyone comment on my work. So internally, I struggle with having confidence in my own work if I haven't had any feedback on it. So I didn't really know what level I was, or whether I actually was had a talent for this. So therefore, hearing someone who is however many steps above you say, no, you're not refined yet, but there's something special there. And if we do this, and this, you'll start to improve, and you will gain your confidence. But I think with Erin as well, I think understanding that it is a slow process. So kind of managing expectations as well. So therefore, if you're in a year's time, you're not like a 1,000 steps of where you started, that's fine. So I think, yeah, managing expectations and kind of preparing you for how tough it's going to be, building your resilience, does help with imposter syndrome, because you're not comparing yourself to other people as much. I think, we all struggle with that, comparing ourselves to each other. But I think what a mentor can do is really pull out your skills, your USPs, do you know what I mean? And yeah, give you a different perspective on yourself that you might not have ever thought of.
Yeah, it's reframing, isn't it? Really, that's brilliant. Now I'm aware of the time, so what I think we might do is start to filter in a few of our many audience questions, because the floodgates have opened and lots have come through. So thank you for sending in questions. There's I was going to ask you a question about it, but I've got a little line here, and then I'm going to bring it back in a bit later on as well. Just to note this idea of looking for a mentor, that the key principle here is that idea of being considerate and being respectful. So if someone's taking the time to provide the amount of support that these guys have, and Erin has provided it in the stories that we've heard, you need to make sure that you're respectful of their situation, that you're very prepared when you're going to interact with a mentor, and that you're prepared to understand kind of their situation, also know what kind of the expectations and requirements are in place. So what Charlie, who's our wonderful admin, is going to do is drop a screen skills resource in the chat section, which I encourage you all to go and have a look at. It's a 15-minute course that you can do, which gives advice on sourcing your own mentor, and how to work with them in a way that is respectful and understanding. So please have a look at that, which Charlie will stick in. Now, we're going to do a quick fire round of question answering to try and get as many done as possible. So I'm going to try and screen them, but I'll read them out loud and see where we get. So Catherine has a question. I've experienced making natural history documentaries in China, and I recently moved to the UK. However, I haven't worked in the documentary industry here yet, so I think I might need to start with some entry-level positions. Do you think sending cold emails would be a good way to look for these opportunities? Thank you so much. Anyone think that they've got a good answer to this one? What do you think on this, Alex?
It's a difficult one. And I'd say, I think probably these days, not so much cold emails. That used to be quite common. And I think, and this is probably a good thing, that places are tending to advertise job roles more, and it's a little bit less about like just having to be in the right place at the right time, although there is still an element of that. It's like cold emailing doesn't necessarily hurt, but I don't know, right now when things are pretty quiet and there's so much competition for jobs, I'm not sure how much benefit there is to it. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I think the first approach to somebody when it's directly about a job, it doesn't necessarily always work, especially when the industry is going through a tough time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thinking back, of course, we've cold emailed, we all have. Sometimes it's worked, most of the times it doesn't work. But I think what really works is, if you meet people to exactly ask that sort of question in terms of, say, I've moved and I'm just looking for a little bit of advice. Are you happy to see me for half an hour for a coffee? That might maybe get you a better chance of getting one lead leading to another lead than sort of sending a cold email out saying, I'm looking for a job, do you have one?
That's true. That's true.
Definitely. Like, yeah, emailing about jobs at the moment, saying, do you have any jobs? You probably won't even get a response, will you? Because it's just like, no, we don't. But then not even mentioning a job and just being like, I'm just wondering if you have a little bit of advice on this topic. If you have time, would you, could we meet for coffee, like you said, Ash, or do a quick Zoom? And then, that person, you might start to build a relationship with them and they might become your new mentor. But like, just
or it might connect you to somebody who's totally relevant.
Exactly.
Like, you might be looking for a China-based researcher or somebody from China as a research person and say, oh, I just know the right person within the industry who might be. You never know how that one thing leads to another, but that link doesn't necessarily always happen on cold emails because they don't know you yet. You're just an email. So, yeah.
I think that's that key element, isn't it, Ash? Like you were talking about before, building a rapport, that sense of nuance. If you're sending a cold email, it makes it sound like it could be automated. You don't want to seem like you're AI. Look to start building that relationship, because this is something we talked about in a networking webinar a week ago as well. You're playing a long game. You want to build up relationships that will last. You're not trying to, this isn't a merchant situation. You're not trying to buy chocolate off of someone. You're trying to establish a long-standing relationship. So treat it like you would do that. Like you were almost building a friendship. But you got a 3-panelist answer there, which is a rare thing. So congratulations. Now Steph says, "Hi, I'm Steph. I'm about to graduate in a few weeks in New Zealand. I moved here for this and plan to move after wherever there is work, but I don't know where I stand a shot. So how do I find a mentor if I don't even know where I will live?" Ash, as someone who's
First, I really miss New Zealand. That's the first thing I want to say. I loved living there for 2 years. Yeah, that's a really tricky one. I mean, if you look at the flip side of this, if you're open to living wherever the work is, then win-win, I think, to some degree. If it's sort of down to where you're going to live then you'll have to look for work there. But if you're open to sort of opportunities in various parts of, and you can live there realistically, then you're looking at a much wider spectrum of opportunities, I think.
That's great.
That's my answer.
What about you, Evelyn? What was your thought on that?
It wasn't necessarily about jobs, but just from my experience, in terms of like developing a relationship with a mentor, my whole relationship with Erin for the first 2 years was online. So, you know, we managed to develop a friendship online. The first time we met was on that shoot. So I can't help with the job side of it, but your mentor doesn't have to be in the same place as you. Erin was on the other side of the Atlantic. So don't let that stop you, I don't think. Just make sure it's someone you really want to learn from. Yeah, you know, appreciate their work and, you know, be fascinated by their work in particular. Yeah, because then they'll recognize that. And they'll know that you haven't just emailed 100 people.
That's a great answer. I think it's something that's become increasingly relevant over the last couple of years, is that these relationships, I mean, as we know, Alex and Ash have dealt with a lot, that, you know, shooting relationships don't take place necessarily in the same place anymore. You know, we're recruiting people overseas remotely. So establishing a mentoring relationship and getting feedback with someone who's not necessarily in the same place as you is very possible and very much catered to now. Evelyn, I've got a quick one from someone for you as well, which is, and you touched on this a bit before, how frequently should you interact with your mentor? I only write to give relevant news, or when I have achieved my task, can go months without talking. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, same. Yeah, just like I said, it was whenever we have periods of time where we talk more, where there's more going on. But yeah, we at the start there could have been a few months where we don't chat, but you know, that could have been because Erin was on like a shoot and she didn't have internet for 3 months. That's fine. Just yeah, keep touching base every now and again. And yeah, so there's no set rules. It doesn't matter. Just be respectful of their time.
Yeah, I think it's anything that fits within the parameters of what you've agreed. It's
Exactly.
it's gauging the vibe.
It's
which is
unique to
horrible.
everyone. It's completely. You could live next door to your mentor. Do you know what I mean? And you would see them more often, but it doesn't matter as long as there's respect and appreciation for each other.
That's great. Thanks, Evelyn. Now, Alex, I've got a question here for you. What advice would you give mentors who get assigned a mentee who wants to get a different role or go into a slightly different area to the one that you're in?
Advice for a mentor who is assigned. I think, I mean, when that's happened with me, I've just done, you know, as best I can with, you know, with being able to help, which often, you know, there is quite a lot of stuff that's common across the industry and you know, even outside of natural history and so on. But then, yeah, like I sort of said earlier, once it gets to the point where there's more sort of specialist knowledge required, then as a mentor, you may well have other people that you can call on to provide that sort of specialist knowledge, and you probably will, because you probably will have worked with lots of people from all different aspects of the industry. So you can kind of do that, or if it's more like actually the mentee really needs to talk directly to someone else about this because I just don't have a clue, then, and again, you can, you know, put them in touch with another person and just say, and arrange, and that can be a sort of another mentoring situation that emerges from your original one, or it could just be a one-off thing or whatever. So yeah, I think as a mentor, you just want to be drawing on all your, well, anything you can that's gonna help with that, you know, whether that's people you know or your own knowledge, or just even looking stuff up that based on what you already know is easier for you to find stuff out than it is for someone who's just coming into it fresh.
So thank you, Alex. Now, Ash, I've got a question from Anthony here, which is about reverse mentoring. So did you discover that as you mentored, you also learned certain things yourself? I'd love you to cover more on reverse mentoring.
No, absolutely. It is one of the most enriching, rewarding processes. So very much. You learn so much about, it reinforces your own knowledge in things. It your mentee's journey towards success is also in such a huge way your own journey towards success. If they succeed, you feel like, yay, on some level, you know, you've succeeded. So very much, it's a hugely mutual learning process, hugely mutual learning process. And then there'll be questions that will be asked of you, which you wouldn't ever think of sort of exploring, because then the mentee, your mentee suddenly asked you something, but you don't have the ready answer to that. And you explore it and you figure it out and you come back. And again, like exactly what Alex was saying, there might be an area of specialty that you don't know very much about. You might sit in on that extra call that you might have between somebody else and them. And the whole process is hugely enriching. So I think it's not a one-way street at all in terms of gain. As a mentor, you gain so much from that process, really. And it also keeps you really sort of, I don't know, it's a fantastic energy. It keeps you very mentally happy as well, to be able to do that, I think. So
that's such a good answer. And I think if anyone, I would love it if people have attended this webinar and want to get into mentoring as a mentor themselves. It's something that obviously you can do in a kind of informal way by working with people around you, if anyone that comes to you, but do go to Screen Skills and look up opportunities to get involved as a mentor as well, and see if there's any institutions near you or even the bodies within which you work where you might be able to do that. Now, I've got a question from Matt, which I actually want to open up to everyone, because we've not really covered it, and I think it's more something where if you've got tips that you can loop in, it'd be really good. How do you initially go about identifying and first approaching people who you think would be a good mentor? Now, the three of you have been Evelyn and Alex especially, you've been involved in this more in a quite structured, formal procedure. Ash, you've kind of had more informal mentors and mentees. What advice have the three of you got for actually starting that process, finding someone? I need to pick someone, don't I? Who looks the most ready?
Okay, I'll start with one. I can start with one little tip. It doesn't have to be somebody, I don't think mentoring needs to be somebody who's like necessarily that much more senior to where you are in your career at all. You don't have to be looking for the most senior person out there, or, even in the senior category. Sometimes actually having a mentor who's 2 steps ahead of you, or even 1.5, 2 steps ahead of you, having a mentor at that level as well, in fact, sometimes can be a very enriching, very, very sort of, a very eye-opening experience, because they've gone through what you have quite recently in comparison. So it's not always a vertical thing, I think. So when you are keeping your eyes open in terms of who you can turn to for mentorship, it's very important to also keep your mind open in terms of who that mentor can be, and what that mentor looks like in your head doesn't necessarily have to be the right. That might not necessarily be the right fit. You may be somebody else who's not that far up in their career. And sometimes what happens with that sort of thing as well, when people are not that senior, or or not maybe on that level busy, they might be able to also give you more time. So it's something that might work very well mutually.
They're probably more likely to relate as well.
Relate, exactly. That gap, that less of a gap sometimes. I mean, it's not always the case, because sometimes you definitely want to turn to sort of like the industry icons to you, for sure. I mean, that also has its benefit, but both do, I think.
But yeah, see, like since I've known Erin, first met her like 4 years ago, and I've seen her rise to stardom in the time I've known her, and it's been really inspiring for me. So I liked kind of having, she's a lot of steps ahead of me, but she's not yet at the top. She's about to be, but she's not yet. So seeing her, like her growth as well, kind of alongside mine, was it was just really inspiring. It was like, okay, this is possible.
Yeah, you see yourself. The mentee sometimes can see themselves in the mentor as well, which can feel like this is achievable by me as well. Like, you know what I mean? Sometimes that identifying factor is very important, because then you feel like the goal that you're going for is not like, you don't have to. Yeah, it feels more achievable. It feels more achievable.
And they're closer to where you are. So having someone that's been, so far removed from you, they might have forgotten what it was like, or they almost can't. Not forgotten what it was like, but it
might feel like a long way till you become them, is what I mean. So sometimes that way,
that's a great way of framing it. What do you think, Alex?
I think just sort of going back to the question in terms of like actually finding a person in the first place who you think would be relevant, because you know, when you're starting out, you might literally just not know anybody in telly. And so, but presumably you're interested in the subject and you watch TV, you know, natural history shows, and you can see the credits and you can see who was involved in the shows that you particularly love, and you can potentially approach some of those people. And, you know, like we've said a few times, you've got to do that in a really respectful way, and you've got to understand that people are super busy and telly all the time, and you won't necessarily get an answer. And that doesn't mean that, you know, that's not a personal rejection. That's just people are busy and they don't necessarily have time to respond to everything. But that is a way of potentially getting in touch, or, you know, following people on Instagram and seeing what they're up to. And then, yeah, you can try, and that just might be a good way of finding an initial person who seems like they're doing the sort of thing you want to be doing, and, you know, that they may or may not be able to help you, or they may know someone who can.
That's a brilliant answer. Thanks, Alex. Now we've got I've clocked in 2 more questions. One is specifically for you, Evelyn. I'm going to press you to give quite a quick answer to this, but I think it's useful to answer this one live. So Jana says, hi, Evelyn, I'm an ecology student and I'm curious about your journey as a zoology graduate. What skills do you think were most important in making you eligible for Girls Who Click?
I guess they could see that I was passionate. So I had this big body of work, wildlife photography. So even though I was a zoology graduate, I said in my application, I want to be a wildlife filmmaker. I think I just showed that I was really passionate. But in terms of what made me eligible, I don't know. I was surprised I got it myself.
I think it is that motivation, isn't it? That it's that
Pardon?
enthusiasm. It's that enthusiasm and making sure that comes across, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think one worry that a lot of people in the industry have is that to get your first researcher credit, you need to have a researcher credit, and there's a spooky element to that. But obviously, the way that you can maximize your chances is to make it very clear how what you have done and what you've succeeded in, what you've done confidently, feeds into the thing that you want to do next. It's very generic careers advice, but, you know, utilize the resources that you have instead of being worried about the resources that you might not have yet.
That's a good point, actually, Jake. Yeah, because in my last year of my zoology degree is when I applied to the Girls Who Click program, and I just decided not to do a science research project. I decided to do a media project, and just with no experience, but they saw that in the application that I was doing that. So maybe that was why, just kind of showing you're willing to just go up and do it, even if it's you make something crap, like you're just willing to go and do it.
That's great. Thanks, Evelyn. Now the last thing I've got here, it's an interesting notion. I'm not sure if anyone's done it, but would you advocate group mentoring and kind of meeting up as a collective and feeding back to each other? Is something that Anthony's asked about. Has anyone got any experience of that?
I've done some group mentoring before. It's an interesting experience because everybody's skill sets and sort of talent levels are very different. But that actually may sometimes be a great thing. So it's a completely different approach, I think. And it's about sort of highlighting each person's, I think there was a question was related to comparing here. And it's definitely not about that. It's very much about sort of highlighting each person's strength area and taking that one forward. So sort of, it's a mix of people that bring various different things to the table rather than comparing one to the other.